All right, let's go into these components because again, I said it seems like a lot, but as we walk through it, you can see how it all comes together in a mutually reinforcing way that's quite doable and implementable in the schools we have as they are now with the student needs we face at the current moment. All right, so the foundational element, and this was really driven loud and clear by the teachers on the ground, is we have to put more upfront focus in building strong relationships all around. That's really what got fragmented in the pandemic and didn't just bounce back by itself. So we need good relationships between adults and students, between students and other students, between adults in the building, and between adults and parents and caregivers. And we really need that to work, at multiple levels. And it really depends on having this school culture of belonging where everyone feels validated, accepted, affirmed, and treated fairly. That's like the foundation of creating those strong relationships. Once we have that as a baseline, and really the idea is like you should do that first because that will help reduce the number of students that need additional supports. We know we need to have this idea of both holistic and real-time and actionable data. Now, in a way, most schools now are awash in data. And it's often the idea they're data rich, but data integration poor, which means they have lots of data points, but they don't have clear and simple ways of bringing them all together to give them holistic looks that are actionable and don't require lots of clicks to get there, right? So we know the elements of this holistic real-time actionable data, which is it needs to include this idea of predictive indicators, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, things that have been shown by research to be cases where kids are waving their hands saying, I need some help now, and if I don't get it now, things are only going to get worse. We also need to pull in insights from students, teachers, school staff, family caregivers, as they have the most immediate and complete knowledge about what's going on and what's challenging students and what might work to help them. And we need to really include beyond academic and attendance measures and behavior measures, sort of those traditional indicators, information about well-being, belonging, and connectedness and experience in their classrooms, because that gives us that rich relationship, foundational sense of connection, which, as we said, we can actually measure, monitor, and improve. And we need this data to be continuously available and as real-time as possible throughout the school year. We need it to be available at the student level, but also that we can aggregate it up and look at like classrooms and grades and teachers. And it needs to be things that school and district people can act upon, right? It is informative sometimes to know if a student, comes from a lower income situation, or if they've had certain background characteristics. But those aren't necessarily immediately actionable, right? They may inform us about why something is happening, but we need data that lets us say, this is something we can act upon. And if we do successfully, we'll see that data change. Right. And a good way to think about this real-time actionable data is the two ABCs, right? So the traditional research-based predictive indicators really proven again and again in early warning and on-track work are attendance, behavior, and course performance, right? In order to succeed in school, you have to be there on a regular basis. When you're in school, you have to be able to focus in class and get your work done. And to be able to succeed in the course in itself, you've got to, make sure your assignments are done. You have to pass your tests. You have to do the things to earn a decent grade in that class. So it's not surprising when students are not there on a regular basis, where they're not able to focus, when they're not able to get their work done, that they struggle academically and then often behaviorally or social emotionally, and each could sort of influence the other into a downward spiral. In addition to what we've learned over the pre-pandemic, but really driven home by the pandemic, is there's the second set of ABCs that often actually drive that first set of ABCs. And the second set of ABCs can often be thought of a broader sense of well-being, which is agency, belonging, and connectedness. Agency is that you have some control over your fate, over what happens. You're just not, have to be passively subject to what others tell you has to happen or how you have to do something. Belonging is a sense that you feel a part of the enterprise of school. You don't feel as an outsider or an other. And connectedness means like that deeper sense we said, that you feel that people know and care about you as a person at multiple levels, and you feel welcome for who you are. And the key thing we try to really drive home is that not only are those all good sort of prevention activities, but they really drive, in many ways, attendance, behavior, and course performance. So they can be thought of as sort of the first almost, group of interventions to do if you're trying to improve attendance, behavior, course performance, is to make sure and increase your student sense of agency, belonging, and connectedness. And the point is, and we'll get into more detail later and in more advanced courses or trainings about how that can be done and how it can be measured. All right. So now we've done our good work to build relationships. We have our actionable data for the 2 ABCs. And now we got to do something with it, right? The whole idea of student success systems, building out of early warning and on track, is we want to be able to help students sooner rather than later, proactively instead of reactively, preventively instead of remedially, right? So to do that, we've got to use data and insights to progress monitor all students, not just assuming, oh, there's some students we don't have to worry about. We're only going to worry about this group of students we know ahead of time we think we should worry about. But what the pandemic has taught us is that all kids were impacted, and in sort of ways that are still dynamic. They could be fine now and not later, right? So we really got to keep our eye on everybody. We have to look for patterns and trends, because at the scale of student need we have now, we cannot individualize our way out of the challenge. We can't create a customized solution if we have 250, 300, 400 kids that are signaling a need for help, or even 100 kids in many cases. And that's the thing we have to relearn, because many of our other systems for student support quite quickly go to individualized level solutions. And that can be very powerful, and it's still very much needed. But we have to balance that with looking for patterns and trends and places where we can help groups of students at a classroom level, at a grade level, at the school level, as well as individuals. And that's where patterns and trends matter, as well as sort of underlying causes. And we find, and think about these solutions, right? We got to get lots of insights, and they need to be sort of student-centered and adapted to the local context. And then it's important that we evaluate them. Are they working, right? And that's a step we often don't take, and we'll go a little more deeper into that later. Okay. Right. As I said, critical to this sort of analysis, response, and improvement system is looking for that strategic point of intervention. And it's also important that we support our teams, our student success teams, which we'll explore also in a minute, with professional learning frameworks or protocols that really helps them stay, focus in on this pattern and trend analysis and not get drawn into that where our heart takes us. Let's all work together for the most neediest student we can all think of. We need to do that, but we need to balance that with how can we help larger numbers of students in strategic ways. And the other thing we really heard loud and clear from our teachers and counselors is for this all to work, for this all to have staying power, for all us to move from a new to normal practice in schools, which is the goal, we have to develop a shared set of mindsets amongst the adults doing the work. It can't be seen as a compliance thing or a task to do. There has to be a common understanding of the why. And to understand also, this will take time. This is going to be the longest and slowest part of the process. We begin from where we are, we build to where we need to go. But it really happens through dialogue, reflection, and experiences. We can't mandate people to have mindsets. Right? And just a few we want to really highlight that are sort of beyond those that many of us know well are essential to a student-centered perspective, which is we need to have a belief in educator and student agency, really thinking that students and educators can find solutions to the challenges that are making it hard for kids to be in school every day, hard to focus, hard to get their work done, and not falling back that this is an insolvable problem. A belief that good outcomes can be attained for all, and we don't have to go right to triage and say we can help some and hope for the others. We've got to really have a strategy that lets us help all kids. We have to know this is really about improving with and together and not alone. So much of student support work ends up being solo work. When we have those many teams, a behavior team, an attendance team, a well-being team, in reality, in many of our schools, that ends up being a 1 or 2 person team, or a specialist, the counselor, the mental health worker, the psychologist, and they end up having caseloads of 150 or 200 kids that they are mightily trying with all their might to help. But it's just too many kids for a single person to deal with. And it just ends up being that, like, it becomes a frustrating experience for all around. So it really has to be that with and together. And then finally, that we act on evidence and a shared understanding rather than compliance or custom. And again, because of the stress and scarcity under which so much of our schools operate, it is a normal human thing to fall back on compliance and custom. It gives you a short grammar of how to get things done when you don't have a lot of resources and you have limited time. But the heart of student success systems is it has to be driven by evidence and a shared understanding, and not just done because that's the way we've done it before. Because if we're honest, the way we've done it before has left a lot of kids without the help they need.